If you're watching this right now, I need you to remember one thing: don't look behind you. This isn't one of those cheap horror stories you can just click away from. This is a true account, pulled from police records, that was so disturbing, the town it happened in actually erased it from public history. You're about to hear about a farmhouse that made everyone who stepped inside vanish. No one, no police officer, no priest, no rescue team, ever came back the same. Some never came back at all. And tonight, you're going to walk through it with me, step by step, room by room, until you realize it's already too late to leave. The snow that year had overstayed its welcome. It lay thick across the Bavarian countryside, a blanket of white pressed over the land, smothering sound, muting movement. In that kind of winter, the world feels emptied out. The roads go quiet, the forests stand motionless, and every farmhouse becomes its own little island. Hinterkaifeck was one such island, a lonely farm, far enough from the village that no one could hear a scream, yet close enough that smoke from its chimney could be seen in the distance. It was the sort of place that, in the right light, might have looked charming, but in the long shadow of late March, it seemed to retreat from the world, as if it wanted to be forgotten. The Gruber family had lived there for decades. Andreas, the patriarch, was 70 years old, sharp-featured, hard-mouthed, and stubborn to the bone. His wife, Kazilia, 66, kept the home running with quiet efficiency. Their daughter, Victoria, had returned years earlier, widowed, with her own 2 children, 7-year-old Kazilia, named for her grandmother, and 2-year-old Joseph, small and wide-eyed. The farm's newest addition was Maria Baumgartner, the maid. She had only just arrived. Her belongings, a single trunk and a small satchel, had barely been set down when she became part of the final chapter of Hinterkaifeck. But the chapter hadn't begun with her arrival. It had begun weeks earlier. There was the newspaper, first of all, a Munich paper, left on the front step. No one in the family had ordered it, no one had walked to fetch it from town, and no one in the surrounding farms read that edition. It was as if it had been placed there for them, by someone they did not know. Then came the missing keys. A small one at first, from a cupboard. Then the large iron key that locked the tool shed. Disappeared without a trace. And then the footprints. They appeared one morning after a fresh snowfall. A single trail of prints, deep and deliberate, leading from the edge of the forest straight toward the back door. But there were no prints going back. Andreas had searched the property. He'd found nothing, but the wrongness of it lingered. There had been sounds, too. In the attic, the previous maid had heard them, the steady rhythm of footsteps crossing the floor above her room. Not the frantic skitter of animals, not the creaks of old beams in the wind, but measured steps, paced like someone exploring. She had left the farm soon after, unable to sleep with the knowledge that someone, or something, might be up there. No one had thought to check. The day Maria arrived, the snow was melting in patches, revealing mud underneath. The air still carried the sharpness of winter, but the forest felt watchful, the way it does when animals pause to listen. Inside the house, the air was warm with the smell of bread baking. She might have noticed, if she'd been looking closely, that the attic hatch was shut but dust had fallen from its edges. She might have seen the faint scuff marks on the wood beneath it. But she had no reason to think the attic mattered. That night, the wind rose. The house groaned in its joints, the shutters rattled. And above the new maid's room, footsteps began. They moved slowly, from one side of the attic to the other. The boards gave just slightly under the weight, enough for the sound to sink down into the room below. The next day was uneventful. Chores were done, animals tended, bread baked, the rhythms of farm life carrying on. But the sense of being watched never quite left. It was the evening of March 31st when everything shifted. As daylight thinned, a sound came from the barn, faint, but strange enough to draw attention. A rustling, or perhaps a human sound, muffled by the thick wooden walls. The barn was a cold place in March, the straw still damp in patches, the air smelling of earth and livestock. Its loft was dim even in daytime, the high beams collecting shadows. Whoever entered first did so with a lantern. The light flickered against the hay bales, against the dark beams overhead. The silence inside was heavy, like a breath being held. Then, movement. The first blow came quick, with a force that ended thought and breath in a single instant. The lantern clattered to the ground, sputtering out in the straw. Darkness swallowed the scene, leaving only the sounds: a scuffle, another blow, a body collapsing. Another family member came, perhaps calling out as they crossed the yard. The barn door opened again. The air inside was still cold, still heavy. Another shadow moved, another strike. It happened again, and again. One by one, they entered. And one by one, they did not leave. When it was over, 4 bodies lay in a heap, half covered in hay. The killer had worked quickly, methodically. There were no screams heard in the village, no shouts across the fields. Only the slow quieting of the barn, the wind pressing at its walls. Inside the house, Maria was still in her room. She may have heard the barn door once, maybe twice, but no more than she'd heard it on any other evening. She was folding her few belongings when the door opened behind her. There is no record of what she saw, only the result. She was struck down where she stood, her blood spattering the wall, her body crumpled beside her small satchel. The killer moved on to the nursery. The blows were quick there. Silent, and then, he stayed. For 3 days, Hinterkaifeck remained occupied. Smoke curled from the chimney each morning. Fresh bread was baked, milk was poured, the animals were fed and watered as though nothing had changed. From a distance, the farm looked entirely normal, a self-contained life carrying on. But inside, the stillness of death was everywhere. The barn's air grew thick with it. The house was orderly, but the warmth was a counterfeit kind, the warmth of a predator in its stolen den. No one came until April 4th. Neighbors, uneasy at the silence, walked the mile from the village. The gates were closed, the yard was still, the barn door resisted them at first, as if weighted from inside. The smell met them before they saw anything, a smell that was more than rot, a mix of iron and damp straw. They pulled back the hay, and what lay beneath sent 2 men reeling toward the door. The bodies were stiff, unrecognizable under their injuries. In the house, everything was in place. A coffee cup sat half-drunk on the table. Crumbs marked the edge of a plate. Beds had been slept in. The attic was empty. The investigation began immediately, and suspicion fell heavily on Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor with ties to Victoria. There were whispers, about paternity, about arguments over inheritance, about grudges that ran deeper than the snowdrifts outside. Lorenz had been among the first to find the bodies, and more than one witness remarked on how calmly he moved through the house afterward, opening doors, touching objects, as if he feared nothing within. But the case refused to settle into certainty. Others believed the killer had no connection to the family at all. That the murder was an act of opportunity, the work of a drifter, perhaps, or worse, the work of someone who had already been living there. The theory was simple in its horror. The attic had not been empty in the weeks before the murders. The footsteps heard by the previous maid were real. The missing keys, the strange newspaper, the footprints that came to the door and went no further, all signs of a presence waiting for the right moment. The farm was demolished in 1923. During the demolition, workers discovered the murder weapon, a mattock, hidden in the attic rafters, its handle worn smooth by use. The case officially closed in 1955, but it never truly ended. Files remained open, questions unanswered. Even into the 1980s, investigators revisited old evidence, chased fading leads. And in the villages nearby, the story took on a life of its own. There were those who swore they'd seen shapes in the fields near where the farm once stood. That in certain winters, when snow lay deep and undisturbed, footprints could be found there, a single set, leading toward where the back door had been, with no return prints beside them. They say that if you stand there at night, the air feels wrong. Too still, as though something is holding its breath above you. And if you wait long enough, you might hear it. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crossing from one end of an attic that no longer exists, to the other. And if you hear them, it's already too late. You think it's over? No, places like that don't just disappear. That farmhouse is still standing. The locals say if you drive past it at night, you'll see lights flickering in the attic. Lights that have been burning for decades without electricity. And sometimes, if you roll your window down, you'll hear faint knocking from inside your car. That's when you floor it. Because once it follows you home, you'll start seeing those same scratches on your walls. And no matter how loud you scream, you'll never get an answer. So, are you brave enough to check your locks tonight? Because if the door's open, it means it's already here.